on astonishing day, we have an American Pope, Pope Leo the 14th is from Chicago, though he spent two-thirds of his 69 years from outside of the country, mostly in Latin America. More on that as the details develop, but knocked me over with a feather. I thought it would take 3 months, and it took 2 days. And I thought you could never have an American, and we got an American. Luckily, I got Senator Mike Crapo from Idaho here, who came to talk about the Senate Finance Committee and reconciliation. But I'll just get a reaction from you, Senator. Is this the buzz up on Capitol Hill this afternoon?
Well, I live entirely in a bubble that says reconciliation and tax policy. So it's not the buzz in my part of the world here.
Okay, let me tell you what the buzz was at lunch. Are we going to get a good pope or a bad pope? Or are we going to get a good bill out of the Ways and Means Committee in the House or a bad bill? There was a buzz that they were actually going to raise taxes in the House bill. What do you think about that, Senator?
Are you talking about the tax increase on the upper income brackets?
Yes.
Yeah, I personally think, I'm focused in the Senate bill on pro-growth tax policies and permanence, particularly for the TCJA. And increasing those taxes does not fit that standard, in my opinion. So right now, I'm not excited about the proposal, but I have to say there are a number of people in both the House and the Senate who are. And if the president weighs in favor of it, then that's going to be a big factor that we have to take into consideration as well.
Well, Senator, I'm just going to give you the quick and dirty at lunch. No, that can't be true. With four Republicans, four conservatives. No, that can't be true. We hear ways that Jason Smith would never, ever raise taxes. Everybody knows Republicans don't raise taxes on the highest income. And I said, call me, and I'll be talking later with guys from AFP and others. I just think politically it's Dick Darman in 1990 and the end of HW. Do people forget what happened the last time Republicans raised taxes?
Well, I'm not in a position to speak for what the House may do. I've been very careful not to do that. They don't like it when I do. But bottom line is, like I said, I agree with the sentiment that you're expressing. And that is, as I've said, I'm focused on what is pro-growth tax policy and permanence for the TCJA. And this doesn't fit that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that, because I think the more people come out and say that doesn't fit that, the better off we are. Maybe they can get back to a quick rethink. Senator, are you working independent of the House? Is the Finance Committee, I know, talked to Senator Lankford about it. Are you going to put your own bill forward from the budget as a first draft, so maybe you guys get ahead of the House, which has gone off the road here?
Well, we won't try to get ahead of the House. In fact, I expect that you will see some kind of a print from the House within a few days if they stick to their latest deadline. But yes, we are working very closely with the House. This is, as you know, extremely complex, both on the tax policy side and on the spending and reform side for some of our programs. And we are constantly in communication with our House counterparts. And I believe in the end, there will be a significant amount of overlap between our two approaches, but there will also, in the end, be some differences. And those differences are what will be managed in a way that it is always handled in the Congress, and that is there will be a House bill and a Senate bill. And where there are differences, we will conference.
That is, to me, it makes sense. It also makes sense to get it done by July 4, which is the date I think Jason Smith told me the last time he was on. Is that unrealistic, or is that doable, Senator Crapo?
Well, I'm not one who sets deadlines or tries to meet others' projections. And so I'm not going to say yes or no on the July 4th deadline that has been set. I will say, though, in answer to your question, that I think we need to act as quickly as possible. We cannot let this linger for too long, because the longer it waits, the harder it is to get it done, and the harder it is to get it done well. So I would hope that we can be acting as quickly as they are talking about doing it in the House. Remember, the House says they will be done by July 4th. I hope that they're done way before that, and that we have an opportunity to be ready by then, but I can't tell you that I can guarantee it.
Now, there are other ways to raise revenue. I know there's a big gap in the budget. I think it's a $500 billion projected deficit over the 10 years that you have to fill, and the more you can raise from revenue, the more. But there are ways to raise revenue, both auctioning of bandwidth, of land. You can open up a Roth conversion window at a flat tax. There are lots of ideas out there. Are you looking at ways to raise revenue at the same time that do not scream tax increase at people?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And you just described a couple of them. I've been talking to some others about different kinds of revenue raisers, if you will. And there are parts of the tax code where we can make reforms that don't amount to a tax increase, but avoid tax evasion, and deal with a number of other types of revenue increases that can come from dealing with those who are avoiding our tariff policy and things like that. So yes, we are looking at ways to raise revenue.
Yeah, Senator, you're the chairman, so I might as well talk to you about it. I am enamored of the idea of a flat tax on a conversion of traditional IRA and 401ks to a Roth because I'd do it tomorrow. I'm old enough to do it. Just take everything out of retirement and pay 15, 20%, whatever the flat is. But otherwise, I'm not doing that. I think it would be a windfall. I believe we've got $20 trillion eligible for a conversion if you open that window. Is that on your table?
It is on the table, and there are a lot of, I should say everything is on the table, and really there are hundreds of proposals that deal with both raising revenue and spending revenue in terms of tax policy. But yes, that is on the table. We're trying to get scores on that, as well as many, many other items. And there is some controversy about that proposal, as you know, but there's controversy about every single proposal we're looking at almost. And so all I can tell you there is it's on the table and we are evaluating it.
Let me ask you the last and toughest question. I save it for last. I'm an agnostic on the SALT deduction. I really am. I know what the president ran on: no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on some overtime. But I'm an agnostic on the SALT because I don't live in a SALT state where Virginia is not that bad. What is the current state of play on the SALT deduction? It's not. I know the New Yorkers and the Californians are begging for some relief, but what do you think?
Well, you're right. New York, New Jersey, and California are almost entirely the three states that are at issue here. There is no senator in the Republican caucus who is from any of those states, and there is no interest in the Republican caucus to raise the cap on SALT. That being said, this is a matter of getting 218 votes in the House and 50 votes in the Senate. And that means the House can lose 3 votes, the Senate can lose 3 votes. There are more than 3 House members in the House from New York, California, and New Jersey. And so the House has an issue to deal with here. This is not one that we are trying to tell the House how to deal with. We would rather just stay right where we are and not raise the cap. But I do believe that the House is going to have to deal with it in some way in order to get the votes to pass the bill.
Chairman, this is not specific. I don't know why anyone would sign up for your job because reconciliation makes my head hurt. And I'm pretty good at most of this stuff. How long do you have to actually be in the Senate before you understand the reconciliation rules? Because I still don't. I've been following it for 25 years. I still don't understand the reconciliation rules.
Well, you asked for how long it's going to be. It takes more than 25 years to understand it. It is as complex as can be. And I have the best staff on the Hill. I guess that'll make a bunch of my colleagues unhappy, but I have the best tax staff on the Hill and the best experts on reconciliation. And they educate me daily as we work through these various issues. The bottom line is it's a very complex process. And we have the Byrd rule in the Senate, as you know, that makes it even more complex in the Senate. And we literally have to go through every issue with a fine-tooth comb. We have to get scores from either joint tax or CBO on every proposal, whether it raises revenue or costs revenue. And we then need to determine whether those proposals will pass the Byrd rule. And all I can say to you is, don't feel bad that you've been looking at it for 25 years and you still don't understand exactly all of its complexities.
Well, go with God. We ended up with an American Pope, so anything can happen. Maybe we'll get a reconciled bill that passes both houses and the president has a big signing ceremony on the 4th of July. Stranger things like an American Pope have happened. Chairman Crapo, thank you for joining me. I look forward to talking to you as this goes forward down the road, and I very much appreciate the time today.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to visit with you, and I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you, Senator. I want to remind everyone, I'll come to the Pope in a moment. I'll learn more during the break. I've got to remind everyone to take their relief factor because I really need it. I almost strained a muscle running back to the studio today from downtown after I said, Catholic Pope, American Pope. So here's my relief factor. And if you're watching on the Salem News Network, Salem News Channel, that's how easy it is to take. If you're listening on the radio, you said, what happened there? Well, I had a sip of water and my 4 pieces of supplement. Icarian and curcumin, or resveratrol omega. 4 pills in every packet of relieffactor.com, and it really works. Gets rid of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging and running back and forth from downtown to the studio, because that took a lot today. And there were more people going different places in downtown D.C. It's a nightmare to drive and sit. But Relief Factor makes it easy. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF, or head to their website at relieffactor.com. $19.95 for the starter pack at relieffactor.com. Pope Leo the 14th, Robert Cardinal Prevost until this morning, from Chicago and Peru, and Vatican City is our Pope. We'll talk about that. You might not have expected commentary from Comfortably Smug on the new Pope, but that's what I've lined up, because Smug probably just blew in from the Vatican. What do you think, Smug? Are you as stunned as I am?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course it's a huge deal. We have our first American Pope. And predictably, as you know, happens today, whenever there's a new public figure out on the stage, everyone goes through their Twitter history, their history of tweets. And so the discussion has already begun, trying to decide what this Pope means by retweeting this, and where this Pope stands on our current president and what they've said about J.D. Vance. So that's just been interesting to follow online.
You know, Smug, I have been talking to people who know a lot more than I do. He's basically an unknown. It'd be like dropping in someone for a ride along that you pulled off of the street. You have no idea, and you'd have to talk to him for a while, but it's a shocker. My level of surprise is because President Trump is not exactly loved in the Vatican, neither is Vice President Vance, and they go for an American Pope. I mean, it is really one of the more unexpected things of my life. He's a little bit older than me. So I was hoping for someone younger than me, but I don't get that.
And I mean, again, you know, speaking of President Trump, he's gotten the World Cup to come to America. He's gotten the Olympics to come to America. Now he's brought the Pope to America. I mean, you cannot say American exceptionalism is not back in full force under this president.
Well, he was on yesterday, and he made a lot of news. I sent Natalie on his team a note last night saying, you know, it's the best interview in the world because he always makes news. When is he going to do a ride along with the Ruthless podcast?
Soon, hopefully. You know, we'd love to have him on. The sooner, the better. He is probably not just the most powerful man on the planet. He's the most entertaining person on the planet too. Oh. That combination, it can't be beaten.
30 minutes of straight conversation, and I always over-prepare because I always know some days he's fast and some days he's expansive, and he was really moving along through this stuff. So I almost ran out of questions. I'm glad I had my bonus Tom Cruise question ready. Ruthless, the podcast, I don't know if you've taped it yet, Smug, but there is a buzz on the Hill that Ways and Means wants to raise taxes. I've heard I've heard the fellas talk about that before. It is Dick Darman, Rideau. It's fall off of a cliff we don't have to jump off of. Have you heard the same stuff today?
Yeah, there have been murmurs of that going around. And again, I mean, it sounds trite to have to say this again and again. This country doesn't have a problem of not bringing in enough. The problem is we spend way too much. So the idea that we can just tax our way out of this mess is on its face completely wrong. It's going to kill growth in this country. It's our job creators who powered this tremendous growth in wages, especially among the working class Americans. The first time President Trump got a tax bill done, we had tremendous growth with the greatest benefits seen among working class Americans. And it's not that complicated. Let's just extend what we did. If anything, you know, cut taxes even more, empower even more growth. We're on the precipice of getting a bunch more of these trade deals done. We could have a truly golden age economically, but to raise taxes at a time like this, I just can't think it's a good idea.
I had lunch downtown with 3 other conservatives, and I said, and we were talking about you guys. We were talking about the Ruthless podcast. I said Smug was on, because one of the guys is Brent Gardner. He's come up after you from AFP. And I said, you know, because he was in shock hearing that we had a tax hike. I said, you know, communicate with the Hill staff through the Ruthless podcast. But I've already heard one of them, I think it was Josh Shea, that's not why we get elected. We don't get elected to raise taxes. And I actually think if you guys just hammer this, the fellas, yep, because everybody in Washington, D.C. listens to you now. I mean, everybody does. They'll get the word, because it's a political nightmare in an off year to raise taxes. I just don't understand it.
It makes zero sense politically. It makes zero sense economically. We were really fortunate. We had Grover Norquist on recently, who, I mean, the data speaks for itself. Every time Republicans win a majority, it's off the back of cutting taxes. The message of cutting taxes, letting the hands that earn the money decide how they're spent. That's where the money is best saved, not in the hands of the government. It's best spent by the hands who earned that money. Every time Republicans run on that message, they win. So to essentially throw away our recipe for success, it makes zero sense.
I hope you just hammer him. Speaking of Grover, I saw him last week. I've known Grover since 1974. We were undergrads together, lived across the hall for a long time. Grover shaved his beard, and he still stuns me whenever he walks in without his beard. Do you guys have that same reaction? Because no beard, he looks like he's 20 again.
He does. I mean, that's the thing is I thought, maybe going to Burning Man or something, but something is keeping him looking young. He looked younger than I did when he showed up on the show. I want to know what his secret is, and I guess it's getting taxes cut.
Getting taxes cut, or actually cutting a beard, growing one, and he's had a beard since he was a freshman in college, I think, and getting rid of the beard does it for you. So, Smug, going back to the fact that Brian Kemp didn't run, Governor Sununu chose not to run, and we've got a primary challenge in Texas. I was reading in Politico today, waiting for Lunchmates, because I otherwise don't pick it up. We're going to have a rough off-year cycle. Do you think so? Is that what's ahead?
I think it's too early right now to call what this cycle looks like. I think if President Trump and Republicans do things like keep the taxes low, cut taxes instead of raise taxes, if President Trump can continue his winning program of deporting illegal migrants who are in this country, of fighting crime, which has been allowed across cities in this country, off the success of those things, we'll do great in a midterm. Candidate quality definitely plays a big portion of it. And it would have been terrific to have those two candidates who poll so well in their states at the top of the ticket for the Senate. But I think we can still find great, credible Senate candidates. What would help them the most is cutting taxes and furthering President Trump's agenda.
Amen to that. Comfortably Smug, thank you. Go to the Ruthless Podcast on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Be as clued in as anyone in Washington if you listen to the fellas twice a week, sometimes 3 when they're doing bonus episodes. Thank you, Smug. Let me tell everyone about andrewandtodd.com. I don't know what markets are doing today, but the 10-year interest rate's going to move, and you're going to have to move sometime, and you're going to have to buy a house sometime, and you want to do it with andrewandtodd.com. 888-888-1172 is their phone number. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, andrewandtodd.com. But what you need to know is that they are a bank. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are lenders. They underwrite the loan. So you apply for the loan to the lender just like you normally do, but Andrew and Todd, soup to nuts. Put your application in. They gather all the documents. They get you approved, or they get you worked up, or they help you with your credit, whatever, or they give you a pre-approval letter or a pre-approved loan. So when you walk in the door and you want to make an offer in a competitive hotspot market, you don't have to worry about having been shut out because you weren't approved and the seller wants to give it to someone who's got an approved offer. They'll do that for you. But you got to make the first step. 888-888-1172 or go to Andrew and Todd, 2 Ds on that, andrewandtodd.com. Fill out a couple of questions. They'll call you up with the best possible move to do. Here's the bonus. You get your house now. When interest rates fall, and they will fall, Trump's going to make them fall. When they fall, they will do the refi as soon as it makes sense for you to do the refi, which will be quickly as the rates go down. You might end up doing it 2 or 3 times. It will always be worth your while, and andrewandtodd.com will always take care of you. 888-888-1172, andrewandtodd.com. Frank Gardner is the vice president of Americans for Prosperity, and he was my dining companion at lunch today when a rumor swept the room that American Pope had been elected, and I looked a little bit aghast because I really didn't think Cardinal Kupich was the guy for the job. But it turned out to be the American who's really a Peruvian American, who's really a Vatican Peruvian American. So, Brett, that's not the fire alarm I thought it was. How about the fire alarm in Ways and Means? What did you find out about the reconciliation bill in the House?
Yeah, no. Well, I think we've still got some pretty significant challenges here, and we've been seeing it today all over social media. We've been having it in conversations with members. It seems too unbelievable to be true, but it seems as though Republicans are on the verge, or at least seriously considering actually raising taxes on some Americans and still preserving some Biden-era Green New Deal policies from the IRA. It's almost beyond belief.
Well, Brent, I began the program with Senator Crapo, who doesn't ever criticize what his House colleagues are up to, but he said for pro-growth extension of the Trump tax cuts, making them permanent, and no tax increases. So I think you got a friend in the Senate at least. Did we get a hard yes that they actually are going to propose that to the House GOP conference? Because that is not going to make it to the floor.
No, I wouldn't think so, Hugh. I mean, what we've been hearing from members today is a lot of frustration on this. And look, this is something that Americans roundly rejected. And that's part of the reason why we have both chambers of Congress, and a President Trump and not a President Harris was a commitment to ultimately extend not some, but all of President Trump's tax cuts. And it seems crazy to think that, Republicans in this era, after running on that, succeeding on that, and then ultimately promising that, would keep that promise. So I'm hopeful that ultimately this is one of those bad ideas late in the game that, ultimately gets rejected, left on the cutting room floor. And then we get back to trying to get the kind of bill that President Trump promised Americans and that Congress promised Americans when they elected them last fall.
One of the things we were talking about at lunch is that you don't introduce big, bad ideas this close to the finish line. It's like a recipe for disaster. Maybe they're just floating a trial balloon, so we're happy with the final result. Is that possible, Brent?
I suppose it's possible, but, bad ideas like this should be left back in the barn. I mean, this is definitely the kind of thing that has got members upset. It's got grassroots upset, and it's got most of us scratching our heads. We know that there are still issues that remain on this bill that need to be addressed, issues that were supposed to be moving us closer to the finish line. This would mark a pretty significant step backwards. It's ideologically different than the way that we've talked about this bill. And to your point, it's not pro-growth. And I know that there's a number of studies that are coming out today that are starting to indicate that, in a big way. So I think from our perspective, there's a good opportunity for folks to use this as a good test case on what trial balloons look like this late in the game and get back on track.
Brent, you and I have been working together for a long time. AFP has been a sponsor of the show for a long time. I think we always agree on everything. We agree that this is a horrible idea. So is there any conservative group anywhere that thinks this is a good idea? Because I'm unaware of them.
Yeah, we're unaware of them too. And we've sure heard from a lot of ones who are not thinking it's a good idea. A lot of us have worked together closely. We've worked with you. We've worked with a lot of these other organizations. All these organizations represent people and effort that have worked on elections, that have worked on issues, that work tirelessly to try and get America to a better place. And what we're hearing is a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and a lot of concern, because they also feel like what we should be doing at this point is paint and polish, not construction on new ideas. We know what we have to do. We have to cut government size and spending, and we have to put forward a pro-growth tax bill. And the truth is, raising taxes on Americans is something that we saw polling just a few weeks ago, and we actually put it out again earlier today. 8 in 10 Americans believe this is not the right time to raise taxes. And so whether it's the individuals who work with those groups or those groups themselves, we have yet to hear of any who would support this idea, would be surprised to hear that there were any, and would have some serious questions if any of them did.
Last question, Brent Gardner. AFP gets very, very loud, very, very fast, as I do. The message is take this idea off the table because this is Dick Darman 2.0, right? This is people who can remember back to 1990, know what happened to George H.W. Bush. He raised taxes after he said, read my lips, no new taxes. That's the equivalent of what Donald Trump said in the last campaign. And every Republican, no one ran on raising taxes. Am I correct?
That is correct. And we should have learned that lesson. It's one that Republicans have known for a long time. And so actually, I know Grover Norquist, actually, from Americans for Tax Reform, just tweeted something similar to that the other day. Look, it's a lesson Republicans learned long ago. It's one we would do well to quickly remember, to move past this, and to get back to focusing on the kind of bill that Americans want, that will make America better and that leads to growth in this country.
Americans for Prosperity will be leading the way, and I will be amplifying their messaging. Brent, good to see you. Even though you're a Bills fan, you're still welcome here anytime. I am such a great predictor of events that I scheduled 3 Jews and a Southern Baptist today to talk about the first American Pope. Mary Catherine Ham joins me. She's the host of Getting Hammered. I love getting an actual laugh out of you, Mary Catherine. I had everything lined up to talk to you about camping and dolls and pencils because I would laugh my way through Getting Hammered. But I got to ask you, American Pope, you're a Southern Baptist, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like non-denominational Protestant, but look, I pray for the new Pope and for the Catholic Church. And I don't like this thing where people who are not at all invested in Catholicism have like 3-minute formed perfect opinions of exactly what the new Pope means for the church and for the world. I don't have that opinion. So I'm going to stick to good old fashioned American jingoism inspired by an American Pope. And I loved the idea of him coming out to like the Chicago Bulls music as he's emerging onto the balcony.
If he's
and I
a
wish him the
Cubs
best.
fan, I'm
I
going
don't
to
know
die. If he's a Cubs fan after they beat the Indians in 2016, now I'll know why. I stole that from another ex-poster. Mary Catherine, I do want to go back to the last episode of Getting Hammered where you were talking about tariffs on pencils and dolls. Because colored pencils are like tranquilizer darts for Genghis Kate, my granddaughter. And we got to have more than 20 of them. We need like hundreds of colored pencils for Kate. We cannot have tariffs on pencils, right?
No, I mean, look, I think this messaging that they've fallen into, Scott Bessent, I think, does a better job when he writes the Wall Street Journal piece about what they're going to do. When Trump starts going off about how many dolls and how many pencils you can have, I'm like, look, dude, I think there's a point to be made about the amount of plastic stuff that comes into my house from China from various birthday parties that I send my children to. Fine. But none of this like scarcity enforced by the government as a sort of moral code. We don't need it. We don't want it. I don't think it's an inspiring message to families who do need far more than 5 pencils. It's just not going to work out for us because they get eaten. Some of them get eaten.
Eaten, but they're also a sedative on otherwise really active children. They love to draw. Yeah. Let me talk to you about camping. This is a pro tip for everyone listening. If you marry the daughter of a World War II Marine, you will never have to camp because the World War II Marine camped from Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima and never went camping. So I've never been camping. And you were teaching your girls to camp alone?
Yes, well, they have to put up the tent alone. I'm happy to go along, but they got to learn this skill. You know, I got to be able to trust them in the apocalypse, okay? I am teaching them relevant skills so that I can have partners when we have to live off the land, you know? And so we have a little simple tent and they can pitch that tent.
How would your family have done in the movie, the Quiet movie, where you can't make any noise because the aliens will eat you? I don't know, A Quiet Place or something like that?
See, now that is going to be a problem for me. I tell my husband all the time, you better hope that the apocalypse is hot, not cold, because I'm much better in the heat, just like wilting magnolia over here. But also, if I can't talk, we're going to have an issue. And if my girls can't talk, we're going to have an issue. Steve and the little boy, they might be able to zip it up, but the rest of us, not.
Now, all my grandchildren are gone. They're all going to be snack food. Now, my last issue with the Getting Hammered episode, I'm not sure if it was you or if it was Vic. I think it was you. You said, I'm old now. Now, I want you to know, when you say I'm old now, that your listeners who are your parents' age really object to the ageism implicit in that, because that makes the new Pope and me ancient of days.
Yeah, but I'm also like ushering myself into this era, right? This is the era of my life where I think I was referring to the fact that I want nice socks for Mother's Day. Yes. And that's fine. I'm comfortable with that. I'm embracing this part of the lifestyle. I deserve the nice socks.
Okay, let me ask you a policy question. The tax hike was floated today. President Trump has suggested that the Republicans raise taxes on people making, I guess, more than $2.5 million a year. Doesn't sound bad until you think about it's a tax hike. That's what brought down George H.W. Bush. What do you think about a tax hike?
Look, I think he can defy political gravity in ways that others cannot. And so maybe a tax hike wouldn't affect him in the same way, but that doesn't mean it's good policy. That doesn't mean it's a good idea. It's more support for the idea that I've said in the past is like the 2024 election, because Donald Trump was so recently a Democrat and has some of these more protectionist views and is more friendly to these ideas like raising taxes. It was like a contest between a 1991 Democrat and a 2024 Democrat. And, you know, I've been critical of Trump in the past, partly because I am more conservative than he is. And even though voting for a 1991 Democrat is better than the 2024, you're going to get some Democrat policies, which is why the Democrats were stupid to not normalize him from 2017 onward, because I think they made him more right-leaning by spurning him the way that they did. I hope they don't do this. I also have issues with the SALT exemption going up, because it means that states don't have to pay for the fact that they have these gross property tax policies. And in fact, they just put it off on the rest of us.
Yeah, the 1981 Trump comes out when you talk national security with him, like I did yesterday. He's very good on that. He wants more submarines, more carriers. He wants, Tehran's got two choices: blow up your own centrifuges, or we'll blow them up viciously. I think he's very good on national security. I'm just unclear on the economy, but I do think Bessent is a very calming force. You agree with that? Just a very responsible, calming guy.
Yes. The more he talks and the more involved he is, the better I feel. I'm not always going to agree with Trump economic policies. I knew that going in because I just don't have the same worldview as he does on some of this stuff, and I'm going to argue against some of them. But I think Bessent is the mature motor here and the person who expresses these things best for him.
Yeah, Rubio, Bessent, Burgum. These are a trio of superstars. They're very good at their jobs.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about Bobby Kennedy Jr. I don't pay much attention. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt gets upset pretty much every day by something he says or does. Do you have an opinion on him yet? I really don't have an opinion on him yet.
Look, I am very wary about RFK Jr. himself. The thing that is encouraging to me about that part of the federal government is the elevation of Jay Bhattacharya, the elevation of Marty Makari, the elevation now of Vinay Prasad. These are people who I trusted to be critical thinkers during the COVID era, which to me is that's the crucible of critical thought, is if you brought something to the table and you were courageous enough to buck your entire ecosystem at that time, I can trust you to think critically in the future. So those guys make me feel better about the guy at the top, but of course they answer to the guy at the top.
Well, in some ways, I hope they don't, but we'll see as we go forward. MK Hammer on X, and make sure you like and follow Getting Hammered, which she co-hosts along with Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. Go sign up, like and subscribe Getting Hammered. Follow Mary Catherine at MK Hammer on X. Let me check on the markets as we come to the close of a trading day that has been unusually full of news. Whether it's Joe Biden, really horrific interview on The View, or a tax bill that might actually raise taxes from a Republican Congress, to an American Pope. I'll tell you more about him in a moment. The market report brought every day to you by AmericanFederal.com, and you can see the number if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, 800-221-7694, 800-221-7694, or go to AmericanFederal.com if you want to buy gold today or sell gold today. Nick Grovich helms American Federal has for 42 years. Nobody better in the gold business, reliable, transparent, honest. Today, gold is down by 2.5% to $3,304 an ounce. I suspect that's because things seem to have calmed down on the border between India and Pakistan. Meanwhile, over on the market, everything is green. The Dow is up 0.86%, the S&P up 0.77%, NASDAQ having a very good day, 1.25% up as we approach the close. But it's gold that some people care about. It's down to $3,304 an ounce. That's off its highs by a couple of $100, and so maybe you're waiting for that to make your first purchase and begin your annual or quarterly purchase date. Give Nick a call and talk to him about what your plan is for diversification into some precious metals. And I always say between 5 and 10% in dirt, and the rest in stocks and bonds and cash. I'm not a financial guru. I don't give financial advice, but I do know that gold more than kept pace with inflation for the past 100 years. So AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. Now, over at the Financial Times, Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost has been elected the new pope to lead the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. He's a little bit older than I am, so he's a relatively young man. He could be pope for as long as I'm around. He could be pope for 30 years. I mean, he's 69 years old. Prevost, the first American to be pope, is seen as a compromise candidate who could find broad support in a divided Catholic Church. Peace be with all of you, Pope Leo told cheering crowds at St. Peter's Square. I want this salute of peace to enter your heart, reach your families and all the people wherever they are around the world. President congratulated him. Many people congratulated him. He is seen as sharing many of his predecessors' views on immigration and the environment, but he's an Augustinian. And I don't know much about Augustinians except their mendicant order, and they're the oldest rule among the monastic orders. And so he's very quiet, the write-ups have. My friends in the business and the Catholic news world tell me very much an unknown, very much a quiet man, very much a Vatican insider. And boy, do they need an insider because I think they're broke. And an American Pope, well, sort of. 2/3 of his career has been in Peru. He's a dual citizen of Peru, but he is Chicago born and raised. He went to Villanova. We're never going to hear the end of this. We Catholics who are not Villanova graduates, it's begun already. The Notre Dame people are very upset. They may break off and have a schism over this because Villanova got the first American Pope. I will talk more about this coming up with Susie Welch, the author of Becoming You. You're going to like that interview coming up. And Eli Lake, Josh Kraushaar. Go nowhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. But on this most extraordinary day, an American Pope, and my opportunity to talk to Susie Welch. She is the author of this brand new Becoming You bestseller. She's in New York, I would assume. Susie, welcome to the program. I sort of inhaled your book because I've got 3 kids and their 3 spouses. 2 of them are in business school. You're a professor at NYU Stern School of Business. You came up with this fabulous book for anyone 25 to 45, I would think. And congratulations. Yeah. It's very good.
Thank you, Hugh. I love it. And I can't believe you mentioned me in the same breath as the new Pope. So I'm going to feast on that one for a while. But thank you.
Well, go out to dinner on that, you and the Pope. But I want to ask you first about, you walk into NYU Business School, you get 80 MBA students. You haven't taught before. I've been teaching for 25 years, law students, but they're a lot like business students. And you got a book out of that, or you took a book in with you and they helped you make a book. Were you at all intimidated on that first semester?
Well, the first semester, I had this idea for what the Becoming You methodology is, and I've been sort of working on it and building it my entire life as a person who had been working in the career space, writing about careers, writing books about careers, and counseling people. I had a show called Susie Welch Fix My Career, so it wasn't like I was a complete newbie to this space or to people who are trying to figure out what to do with their lives. When my first day walking onto the NYU campus, I remember thinking to myself, what in the world makes you think you can do this? But I was very lucky in the first semester. I said to the students, look, I'm trying this thing. It's a new thing. We're always telling you to try new things at your age, and help me. And for the first semester, I had a required assignment after every class saying, how am I doing? And they told me, and I began to get a feel for it, and they were fantastic. And I got better and better, and I wrapped my arms around it. And one day I thought to myself, my God, I have found my purpose, and I loved it. And at that point, they asked me to join the faculty full time, and I was all in.
Susie Welch, of course, is the author of other best-selling books in the past. She is the widow of the famous Jack Welch. And in fact, this book begins with a long walk in the woods when you are grieving and COVID has descended. And I listened to your podcast, Susie, and I thought it was really a fabulous look into, I've written a dozen books, and you're right. It's horrific and wonderful. And you take people through in a 30-minute podcast what it means to write a book like this. So congratulations on that. It will sell anyone on the book who listens to it. So I'd encourage everyone to just put in SUZY Welch and go find Becoming You. Let's talk about the key line in the book, an epidemic of purposelessness upon the land. I agree with you. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it has a couple of sources. One of the sources is that the pandemic raised a lot of questions that it didn't answer. I mean, suddenly with this pandemic, and it sort of hit everybody like, wait, where do we work? Why do we work? Who do we work with? What's the meaning of work? Do we postpone joy? And all these questions got stirred up, and there were a lot of different answers, but the questions were not definitively answered. Then people started to go back to the world, and they were still having the questions. And so that is one component of it, is that a lot of younger people thought, I'm not postponing the life I want because we don't know when all of this might blow up. And we don't know when the next pandemic is or whatever. And they started to say, wait, everything, the timing on my life and the pace of everything is not for certain anymore, and they've gotten lost, and they don't know what their values are because there's a lot of dissension amongst people, even within families, and a lot of stuff got stirred up. And then you find added to that, the last kind of kick in the shins is this technology stuff going on. And that's, look, I like technology. I love technology. I was an early adopter of AI, but if you're a person who's trying to figure out their career right now with the entire economy being turned upside down by a new technology being AI, you are wondering what in the world is going on. Where do I fit in?
Now, Susie Welch, you're the second MBA professor that I've had on in the last year. Arthur Brooks, a good friend of mine. He teaches a very popular class at Harvard. You teach one at Stern. He teaches his on happiness. Your first line is, don't worry, this isn't another book about happiness. This is a book about, and so I kind of think of Arthur's as people on the second half of their careers and yours for people on the first half of their careers. And I can't recommend it enough because values extraction, aptitude assessment, economically viable interest, it made a lot of sense to me. Industry bingo didn't, but this did. So walk through the three-part process of becoming you, because I think area of transcendence is a wonderful concept to get a hold of.
All right. So look, I'm going to say that I've done Becoming You. I've done this process with people from 16 to 78. I do think it's sweet spot is people sort of 25 to maybe even 50, 55. But you're right. It's, it's for anybody who's trying to build or remake a career. It's not a hack. Okay. Its founding premise is that happiness is not a goal. The goal is a meaningful, productive, connected life. And usually the byproduct of that is happiness. But if you go for a life of meaning, you're more likely to have happiness. And so what it asks you to do is put together a bunch of data. And the data is what your values are, which almost no one knows their values. They sort of come back to the big three: family, financial security, but people don't know what values are. A lot of research that shows that. But we have to figure out what our values are. There's 15 personal values. You get a list of yours when you do the work of the book. You've got to identify what your aptitudes are. These are how your brain is wired to do certain thinking and processing tasks, and how your personality is experienced by the world. You got to find that out. You can't guess. You can't tell yourself I'm all these things. You got to find out how the world experiences you. And finally, you need to open your aperture to what really is out there in terms of jobs that could possibly call you emotionally and intellectually, and also pay you what you need to be paid according to your values. It's a lot of data gathering. And then at the intersection of those three data streams, if you will, is what we call your area of transcendence. Another word for it is purpose. I like area of transcendence because it's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the top of that was self-actualization, but most people also want to be connected to the universe. They want to in some way be giving back. And he actually added on to the hierarchy of needs and said transcendence is at the very top, that feeling of being your best self while also being part of something larger than yourself.
Yeah, that is an amazing summary for a very complicated set of analyses that you've got to go through. So my hat is off to you. I kind of hope that you and Arthur end up doing some kind of PBS documentary together, because a couple of business school professors, and you were a Baker Scholar at HBS. My sister-in-law was too, a few years older than you, so you didn't cross paths, but being a Baker Scholar at HBS is a big deal. And I want people in the audience to understand you could be doing anything right now, and you're in a classroom, and you're writing a book is not a lot of fun. Are you satisfied with how you spent the last 3 years?
I'm not only satisfied, I feel exquisitely alive. I feel fantastic. I'm living my purpose. I am a person who I guess could have gone a lot of different paths, or maybe just kept hanging out in the woods with my dogs. I felt called to do this work. I found out that I was pretty good at it. I had something that people felt that they needed. And I don't know. I mean, I suit up every morning. I get on the subway. I go on the 6 downtown and I teach all day. And it's absolutely a new life for me. And so I highly recommend reinvention. You wouldn't want to get to it the way I did, because you wouldn't want to lose someone you loved. But when you reinvent, it's pretty good.
I think it's amazing. And when our mutual friend told me, you really want to read this book, I said, I'm 69 and I'm got like 5 years left doing what I'm doing. No, you really want to read this book. And he's right, because I know who to give it to. Now, my question is, are people listening? Are people in the marketing business picking it up? Because you might put a dent in the investment banking recruitment world. That's what I think. I think a lot of people who might be otherwise.
Right now the book is #1 across all the Amazon lists. And so I got to believe somebody's listening, because people are buying it. It feels incredibly good. And I think people are listening. And look, I've seen a lot of lives transformed by it. I still have a lot of students who go into banking and consulting, but usually they come back a few years later and say, oh, Professor Welch, I'm ready to do that again. Look, there are people who are born to be consultants and bankers. I got no shade against those industries. The world needs bankers and the world needs consultants. But it's also has a conveyor belt quality to it. Not everyone should go into them.
And there are recreational vehicle parks to run. That's what I want to finish on industry bingo. Would you explain industry bingo? Because it sounds like I would love to do that exercise. Your students must love it.
my students love industry bingo. I was a new teacher and I understood that I was competing with TikTok up there in the front of the classroom, and I had to make the class fun and entertaining. And plus I wanted to have fun and be entertained. And I needed to teach my students about all the industries that are out there, 135 industries and 12 mega trends. And I tried, getting up and sort of teaching about them, and the eyes would glaze this over. And so I created a bingo game where basically instead of like numbers or whatever there are on bingo cards, I put all the different industries, and the kids would get very, very competitive about it. And then, somebody would get bingo, and it ends up with people then writing reports about some of these unusual industries that are on their bingo cards. And it's a fun way for people to learn about all the industries, a whole 135 of them, and the mega trends that are coming, like space mining. And I don't know a better way to teach it.
It's a brilliant idea that will be stolen mercilessly by every graduate school professor in every field. Susie Welch, nice to make your acquaintance. Becoming You, available in bookstores now and at Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, wherever you go. Big bestseller, and for a good reason. Sometimes you get lucky when you book guests. Eli Lake is my guest. He is with the Free Press. He is often on the Commentary Pod, and he is the host of the Breaking History Pod. And since history is breaking today with the election of an American Pope, I'm actually kind of lucky that Eli is here. Even though my 11 guests today, I'm the only Catholic, I think. I got like 4 Jews, a couple of I don't knows, a couple of evangelical Protestants, but no other Catholics. But I got a historian in Eli Lake. Hey, Eli, how are you?
No, thank you so much for having me. I just want to correct you. I am a journalist who loves history, and I try to treat history as a journalist would, but I have too much respect for the person to claim that since I don't have my PhD in the subject.
I always think that's nonsense because popular history is history that actually gets read and absorbed. And so I disagree with you. I think your Opium War podcast taught me more about the Opium Wars than I ever knew. I really think it's a fabulous podcast, Eli. You put way much more work into yours than most people do into theirs. I mean, you obviously are working. What do you think is the significance? Before I get to, well, it is. It's fabulous listening. I want to get to the big issue of Iran and the nuke, and you just did a new breaking history on how North Korea got the nuke. But first, your reaction to an American Pope. It's never happened in the history of the Catholic Church, obviously. We're not that old. America's 350 years old, and the Catholic Church is 2,000 years old, but it's still astonishing.
I think it's a great thing. You read some of the Twitter commentary about it, that apparently he has some pretty progressive positions. That's fine. I think it's great. We have Catholics have been a huge part of America since before the founding, since the founding. Just look at the founding of the state of Maryland. And I just think it's terrific. I think it's a great thing for American Catholics, and I think it's a great thing for America.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about the progressive stuff, Eli, only because a lot of people are taking comments on immigration to try and square them up with an American political spectrum. It doesn't work. I've never met any Catholic prelate, whether they're conservative or liberal, who is not on the side of the working poor and the migrant. And so I just don't think it's a very good tell. We have to wait and see. I would like a quiet, competent pope who can get the Vatican's finances fixed. Let's go to Iran. You just did the Breaking History podcast on how North Korea got the bomb. I lived that, and they got the bomb because Bill Clinton blinked. I talked to Donald Trump yesterday. He said Iran can either, we can break them easy or we can break them viciously, meaning the centrifuges. What do you think? Is it really one of two choices?
I think it is one of two choices, and I think that oftentimes I'm among them, of journalists who have tried to write about the restrainers versus maybe the more traditional sort of GOP foreign policy types and the tension between the two in the administration. Donald Trump is the decider. Donald Trump has been fairly consistent, with one exception about a month ago, in saying that they have to dismantle the full nuclear program, including the ability to enrich. That is a good thing. I don't think he wants to get a deal that looks like Obama's JCPOA that he signed in, that actually was never signed, but it was acceded to in 2015. So in that respect, I do kind of agree with you that, I think that his intentions are kind of clear. And this is a bit of deft diplomacy if you think about it. What he's trying to say is, listen, we've given Iran every opportunity. Now, what's interesting to me is that of all the issues that a wing of this broad tent coalition of the new Republican Party it seems that they, for lack of a better word, the restrainer side of it has decided to really make Iran an issue. And so we'll see what happens, because I actually think that Trump would absolutely use force or work with Israel to use force to take out their program if he can't get a deal. And we'll see how, certain elements like Tucker Carlson and so forth will respond.
I know that Tucker is a critic of taking action against Iran, but I disagree with him, and I think 95% of the party disagrees with him. But there are going to be 5% that will be unhappy with anything he does. I do not think we're going to get many people opposed to the president's campaign against anti-Semitism on American campuses. I talked to him at length about that yesterday. I hope he continues to go after Harvard's tax-exempt status. I hope he does it with Columbia. Do you think he's committed to that as well, Eli?
Committed to stats, which is that once I think. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think that there's a concern that I have that once you get too specific about what sorts of programs you want to see implemented with universities when you're talking about the funding, that because I believe that our republic will endure and will get a Democratic president, then that's like, oh, I didn't know I had this tool that I could use. One could argue, by the way, when the Obama administration changed the rules on sexual harassment litigation on campus, that they were doing a similar kind of thing. I didn't like that then either. And the only thing I would say is that in my ideal world, the changes that need to be made at these elite universities would be coming because of kind of social pressure, because of the pressure of culture that precedes politics, and not from the heavy hand of government. That's where I have some reservations, but I think that party and I think the administration is really committed to it. And when it comes to basically enforcing civil rights law so that Jewish students will have the same protections as anyone else, I think that that's admirable. I think it's one of the best things that this administration has done.
For your list of future breaking history podcasts, if you go back and read about the Bob Jones University case and how it divided the Reagan Department of Justice, I was there, I saw it happen, and the aftermath of it wasn't pretty. It's just the Bob Jones case being applied to elite universities and making them live up to the promise of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So I'm not worried about a slippery slope. It's pretty hard to lose your tax-exempt status. You really do have to just violently break the 64 Civil Rights Act, and they're doing it.
Let me push back just slightly. You and I would, I think, agree that there should be real intellectual diversity, and there hasn't been in university campuses for almost 50 years. And that it's not just about hiring conservatives. It's fostering an environment where it's okay to debate anything, particularly when we get into the humanities and social sciences, less so in the hard sciences. So that's a goal that I share. I don't know how I feel about sort of agreements with universities that sort of require you that this is among the many things that you have to do in order to receive federal funding, especially if those were well-earned grants for things in the hard sciences that benefit everybody. I guess I'm much more comfortable with that kind of pressure coming from donors, coming from parents who decide not to send their kids to certain schools, and almost letting the marketplace decide. But on the other hand, when it comes to civil rights law, I 100% endorse the idea that if you're not going to protect all of your students, if you're going to not pay attention to this one minority on campus, well, then the federal government has an obligation to go in the same way I would for any kind of civil rights matter.
Eli, you and I are exactly agreed, at least on that. I want to recommend to everyone again, Breaking History Podcast. Eli will be back. The Free Press deserves your support. Eli, Matt Continenti, Barry White. It's a grand online platform that's growing by leaps and bounds every day. Thank you, Eli. Follow Eli on X, by the way, at Eli Lake, and come right back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, and I am talking about an American Pope. And I'm still a little bit stunned. I've got to be careful about this. Leo the 14th is from Chicago, and he went to Villanova. Very much an American, but he spent most of his life in South America and the last many years in the Vatican. So he's really a man of the world. And I don't think you can put him into a peg. I don't think you can find a square hole or a round hole and say he fits in one of those. It will take time to tell. And time is what he needs, as well as your prayer. Of course, the big story of the day is the election of Leo the 14th, formerly Cardinal Prevost of Vatican City, Peru, and Chicago, with a few years in Villanova, as the new pope. And so I I believe the great value of X, if you curate your feed carefully, is that you get good stuff in it. Gray Connolly from Australia, down under, a very Catholic guy, says, I'm rather surprised that this Pope is an Augustinian. That's an order of a religious order. And the last Pope was a Jesuit. Usually religious orders, well, especially Jesuits, are not meant to seek episcopal offices as they are meant to be in the front lines, not the headquarters. Choice of regnal name of Leo is very interesting. Well, I don't know why it's very interesting, Gray. Tell me why. But then I found another post from Bobby, who posted the first Pope believed to have been filmed was Pope Leo XIII, who was born in 1810. And he served as Pope from 1878 for 25 years until 1903. So this Leo XIV could be 25 years and going because they're roughly the same age. And modern medicine being modern medicine, you just don't know. And we don't know anything about him, and hot takes on what papacies are going to be like are going to be wrong. I don't have a hot take for you. The people that I know who know a little bit about him say very quiet, very careful, very cautious, very concerned with the poor and the lost and the lonely, but also very competent. I don't know much about Augustinians other than the fact that I know some Franciscans, I know some Jesuits, but the Augustinians, I just don't know much about. All I will tell you, there's the film. We'll show you the film of the last Pope Leo XIII. And that's really kind of a remarkable bit of filmmaking. And I don't know what else to tell you other than wait and see. And I thought it would take, look, bad on me. I told Dwayne, it's going to be months. Got 133 cardinals. They don't know each other. And Dwayne said, oh, no, they've been working this out since Francis got sick. And Dwayne was right and I was wrong. And, of course, Bishop Barron said yesterday, no, an American Pope is never going to happen. We're the only world superpower. The rest of the world won't let that happen. And I that was conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is wrong as it was when John Paul II was elected. It was always going to be an Italian. Then it wasn't. Then it was never going to be, the joke was Francis was the first Pope from South America and the last Pope from South America. Not really. This Pope is a Peruvian American citizen, dual citizenship, and he's really a Vaticanista. So we will see. Now to my new affiliate, AM 600 and FM 101.1 WBOB in Jacksonville. Listen to me closely now. If you're listening on the car radio, great. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, great. But if you're listening on your phone, you might be a high data user and you need to switch to consumer cellular. I have gotten a consumer cellular line, and I want to tell you how wonderful consumer cellular is. You don't have to sacrifice for savings. You can have savings without sacrifice. And they will work with you to figure out what plan you actually want. Because if you are a low data user, you want 8 gigs a month and cheap. And if you're a high data user, and like kids, or you got kids in the family, you get 2 lines for unlimited data for $60 a month. You got to go to consumercellular.com/Hugh to get a free month in there. Consumercellular.com/Hugh. Or you can call them at 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. And the reason I give you that number, a lot of people call this cell phone and they can't get through. I always think it's a good test of customer service when you call. How many times do you have to press a button before you get to the person who you want to talk to? With Consumer Cellular, it's once. It's usually under a minute, often under 30 seconds. Sometimes it's 10 seconds to get to a live American in America. Consumercellular.com/Hugh, 1-800-411-4454. Coming up after the break, Josh Kraushaar is going to join me. We're going to talk again about my conversation with President Trump, which made a lot of news last night and this morning. Now it's not going to make any news anymore because the Pope will be the new news. Boy, all those journalists thought they were going to get like 3 weeks in Italy. Now they're not. But they hope they took their relief factor with them. I took it in hour number 1. You saw me do it if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. You heard me do it if you're listening on one of our radio affiliates or the Salem Radio Network. Relief Factor sponsors this studio. They sponsor Studio North, where I'll be next week. They sponsor Studio West, where I go back and forth to. Relief Factor sponsors them all, and Relief Factor keeps me going. And today was one of those days where it's been going from dawn until late in the night. Relief Factor, Starter Pack, $19.95. Give them a call. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF. Or go to their website and find the Starter Pack. The Starter Pack is $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. less than $1 a day for 3 weeks. They lose money on every first pack. But those 4 supplements, the only supplement I've taken in 20 years, I've been taking it every day for 10 years, Relief Factor, because it works. Gets rid of the minor aches and pains that come with trundling. Go to their website, find that special offer at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Who better to comment on the election of American Pope than Josh Kroshauer, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Josh, you're like the third Jude I've had today, so I keep asking everyone what their reaction is to this. It's like I didn't think they would be done with this for 3 months because of 133 people having to get the 2/3. I thought it would be like the Senate, but no, apparently not. What's your reaction to this story?
So perfect timing, right, Hugh. Look, it's very exciting. I'm obviously not a Catholic, but to have the first American Pope, there's a historic nature to this moment that couldn't, just watching from afar, watching the Vatican, listening to now Pope Leo XIV to give a very moving speech. You can't help but, I think a lot of Americans, Catholic or not, were watching it and are quite excited about this historic moment.
Last night I listened to Bishop Robert Barron of Word on Fire Ministry, enormous Catholic online ministry, and he's over in the Vatican for ETWN and his own ministry. And Bishop Barron said, look, we're not going to have an American Pope. He got asked by an Irish guy, what about an American? He said, we're not going to have an American Pope. We're a superpower. It's just not going to happen. And that's been conventional wisdom forever, Josh. It's also been conventional wisdom forever that no American president would strike Iran. I think this American president, after talking to him yesterday, is getting ready to take out the Iranian nuclear program if they don't. He persuaded me yesterday that this is going to happen. What do you think?
It's very possible with the president. We sometimes hear sort of both sides of the issue. The formulation that the president likes to use vis-a-vis Iran is that we're pursuing diplomacy, but if they don't dismantle their nuclear program in full, then we're gonna take military action. I think you hear some mixed messages. We've heard different positions, different kind of emphases from different leaders, national security leaders, Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, the vice president yesterday. Within the administration, the big, and this is very in the weeds, but it's about whether they should, the big debate and where some messages have been mixed from the administration is whether they can be allowed to enrich up to a certain level. In other words, they have their own enrichment program, even if they claim they're not going to be building a nuclear weapon. I think the official position of this administration is that's not allowed. That's not what the administration is going to tolerate. But there have been some mixed messages in recent days on that front, and it would be helpful, I think, for the president. I know the president was on your show yesterday, and I was pretty clear about it. So I think that relieved a lot of folks worried about Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon. But there have been some, like I said, mixed messages from other folks in the administration.
Yeah, I really don't know how you can be more clear than he was yesterday. That we can dismantle it nicely or we can dismantle it viciously. And he said there's no other choice. And so it's dismantling. And that means the centrifuges. I also think they got to give up the uranium. But I don't know how complex of an operation. Has anyone briefed you on how many sites are involved in the Iranian nuclear? I know there are a couple that are deep in mountains, et cetera, but I don't know how many sites there are.
Well, they haven't disclosed all. I mean, that one of the big, and this came up during the Obama negotiations with Iran, but not all of their sites and places where they're suspected of trying to build a bomb are disclosed. So it's very secretive, and that was one of the hangups during the first negotiations under the Obama administration, and it's going to probably that's why Obama had a whole lot of nuclear experts and technical experts, because this is not simple stuff. It requires time and it requires a lot of attention to detail.
I'm pretty sure Israel's got a pretty good blueprint, because they were able to get inside the guest house of the supreme leader and blow up the head of Hamas. So I'm pretty sure they have a pretty good idea of where the sites are, but we'll see. Let me turn to Hamas and Gaza. What is your understanding of when Israel is going to pull the trigger on a major offensive to end the war, absent a hostage deal, release immediately?
Well, take one step back. I mean, the Israeli military has been mobilizing. There have been a lot of reservists in the last week that have been preparing for further invasion or further military action against in Gaza against Hamas. Though there's a lot, if you listen to some of your guests, Hugh, if you listen to some of the smartest Israeli analysts, a lot of people expect, number one, they don't expect any military activity to take place during President Trump's visit to the region starting next Tuesday in Saudi Arabia. But there also is some expectation that the Israeli military push and the tough talk is sort of a preparation for a possible deal that could be struck. So, sometimes in the Middle East, what you see on paper isn't exactly what's happening behind the scenes. So a lot of analysts expect that this could be a prelude to some type of deal, some type of renewed negotiation that Trump and the administration could get credit for. Trump has himself alluded to a surprise announcement before his trip, and a lot of Israeli officials are wondering whether it has anything to do with a renewed negotiation with the hostage negotiation and trying to get the remaining hostages released.
My bet was on the Abraham Accords expanding to Saudi Arabia, but we will see. We just don't know. Josh Kroshauer, thank you for your time. Follow Josh on X at Josh Kroshauer. You will always be up to date on everything going on in Jewish Insider World and in Israel. And then stick around with me next hour. I've got Larry Elder, Bethany Mandel, Sarah Bedford, Jim Talent. We'll be talking about Pope Leo. If you want to see that amazing film of the last Pope Leo, Leo the 13th, go to my X account and go backwards on it, and you will find a retweet or repost of that. I do want to let people know about the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, ALEC.org/U. ALEC.org/U will get you enrolled in the State of the States newsletter, and you'll learn every week what's going on at the various state legislators. Of course, we've got 99 chambers at work at any time in the United States. Nebraska has a unicameral legislature, so that's why it's 99, not 50. Usually there's an upper and a lower house in every state except Nebraska. American Legislative Exchange Council follows it all. Then at the end of every year on tax day, they release richstatespoorstates.org. And if you go to richstatespoorstates.org, richstatespoorstates.org, you'll get the book sent to you for free from the president and chief economist at ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC.org. You'll get the book for free. You'll be able to assess the quality of economic life and basic life in your state. Number one for many years has been Utah. Number two, Florida has held on to it, but there's a lot of moving around this year because there have been a lot of changes in tax policy. They're going to add in education choice next year. That's going to jumble the rankings. But if you want a good read on where you don't want to move and where you do want to move, go to richstatespoorstates.org and get your free copy today.
The projects, the benefits. How do you lead the world without having the best infrastructure in the world? How do you lead the world without having the best healthcare in the world? How do you lead the world without having the best education system in the world? How do you lead the world when you don't have that done?
There were 6 ladies on The View today to try and prop up President Biden, and it didn't work. If you missed that, here he is again, President Biden on The View this morning.
The benefits. How do you lead the world without having the best infrastructure in the world? How do you lead the world without having the best healthcare in the world? How do you lead the world without having the best education system in the world? How do you lead the world when you don't have that done?
How do you lead the world if you don't have that done? How do we lead the world when that guy was our president for at least a year when people were worried? Tom Cotton today, talking in Senate committee. I think you need to hear this too. Cut number 6.
Thank you. Good morning. A horrible one-sided deal that should never, ever have been made. It didn't bring calm. It didn't bring peace, and it never will. Those words are as true today as they were 7 years ago today when President Trump said them, driving a stake through the heart of Barack Obama's disastrous nuclear deal with Iran. That deal was one-sided, in bad faith, and did nothing to stop Iran's march to a nuclear weapon. In fact, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, it didn't block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon, it paved the path.
All right, let's go back and play cut number 6 of Senator Cotton on the ammunition. Cut number 6.
Morning, gentlemen. Mr. Obadol, the Army has begun to modernize the organic industrial base, but it's still not fully using arsenal and ammunition plants. The arsenals, such as the one in Pine Bluff, are struggling for modernization funds and additional work. This underutilization is particularly damaging during a munition shortage that could impact our ability to face adversaries like China, do you believe the Army should utilize the resource it already owns to maximize production for critical munitions?
I think we now know that that armory is going to get a bump. And they need to get that bump. Go back and listen over at YouTube to Chairman Mike Crapo, who began the show talking about the reconciliation process. I think it's going to happen. Now let me tell you about besthotgrill.com for grads and dads. If you got a graduate and they want the small grill for their tiny little apartment patio, great. If you've got a dad that you really want to say thank you to, get them the big besthotgrill.com. Solaire infrared grills are the best available. If you want, you give it for Mother's Day too. I don't want to be sexist here. Moms like grilled too. Solaire infrared grills heat up to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes. Produces the very best, unmatched anywhere kind of grilling. They are all made in the USA, and they are built to last. Solaire grills deliver that wow that everybody likes in a steak or chicken or whatever you do on the grill. besthotgrill.com. besthotgrill.com. For your grads and your dads, and yes, your moms, or your grandpas, or your grandmas, whoever likes grilling, besthotgrill.com. You can try it before you buy it, by the way, if it's one of the big ones, but if it's the hibachi, no. besthotgrill.com. Joined by my longtime friend and colleague, Larry Elder. Larry, big news day. I'm sure you're going to be talking about our American Pope, but I actually drafted you to talk about electric vehicles and your new documentary, Electric Vehicles. You know, I had the weirdest lineup today. We get the first American Pope ever, and I'm talking to you about electric vehicles, and I got like 4 Jews lined up to talk about Israel. But you got any thoughts on Pope Leo the 14th?
Well, I understand he's from Chicago, and I know that you probably have wondered this, Hugh, which is probably too polite to ask it out loud. Is he a Cubs fan or a Sox fan?
No, I asked it out loud because if he's a Cubs fan, that's bad. That's really bad. I hold a grudge. Larry, when I watched your documentary, I want to get right to electric vehicles, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I thought I was the cheapest Salem host when it came to cars. I bought a new car in 2010, and I still have it, and I'll probably never buy another one. But you actually turn out to be the guy who got the car he wanted and took good care of it because your Mercedes is a nice ride. What year did you buy that in?
1989. I walked into the dealership in Cleveland. I paid cash for it, and I've had it ever since then. 1989. What's that? 11 years plus 25. That's 36 years old.
It's a great hook to open up the movie with. But what I liked is you went to the LA Auto Show, and you were actually quite fair and even-handed about this. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone can watch electric vehicles, the good, the bad, and the ugly over at Salem now and not conclude that's a terrible idea. Is that the general reaction you're getting?
Well, that's the reaction a lot of people are getting. I tried to be agnostic about the whole thing. You know, I had no real view one way or the other about EVs. I kind of thought on par they were probably better for the planet than gas-powered cars. And as you know, the documentary is not about how you feel about climate change, whether you feel about climate change as does Joe Biden, that it's an existential threat, or Gavin Newsom, who wants to ban the sale of gas-powered cars here in California starting in 2035, or you feel it's much ado about nothing, or you're in the middle. It really isn't about that. It's really about whether or not an EV, all things considered, are better for the planet than a gas-powered car. And before I started the documentary, it took me about a year to do it, Hugh, I thought the answer was yes, it's probably better. But when you look at everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the good is the technology is stunning, particularly the self-driving stuff. We lose 40,000 Americans every year on the road, largely because of driver error. And while the technology for riderless driver is not foolproof, certainly there'll be fewer people killed because of human error if everybody went to a self-driving car. And all these different things it does, it's so fast, it's so quiet, makes lane changes. I've never driven one without steering wheel before, and it's an out-of-body experience to watch the wheel just take itself and make lane changes smoothly, efficiently, again, more efficiently and more safely than humans can. All that stuff is wonderful. But then you look at the fossil fuel generated energy it takes to make the thing, to transport the thing, and to generate the electricity to charge the thing. You look at all of that, the carbon footprint of an EV is probably about the same, if not even somewhat bigger than the carbon footprint for a gas-powered car. And then you get to the ugly part. And that is that the chips that go into the car come from China, which means we're enriching China, becoming even more dependent upon China. And the stuff that goes into the battery, the so-called minerals, sometimes called rare earth minerals, the lithium, the cobalt, the nickel that goes into the batteries. Either China mines it, manufactures it, or produces it, or they mine it or manufacture to produce it somewhere in the world that they control, particularly places like the Republic of the Congo, Hugh, where you have kids. I'm talking about 8, 10, 12-year-old boys and girls, often because of slave labor, digging this stuff out with their bare hands, and it's toxic. It will cause cancer down the road, and they're paid maybe $1 or $2 a day. I think if people knew that but for the slave labor used to mine the stuff that goes into the battery, I think people would have a very different view, just on the humanitarian level, about owning an EV.
A very, very evocative film of the kids in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, that is in Larry's documentary. Again, it's called Electric Vehicles, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's the ugliest part, is the child labor. I wonder, Larry, how does it, you remember blood diamonds? And people did not want to buy blood diamonds because they were mined by kids. How do EVs escape the same mark of Cain that goes on to blood diamonds? They ought to be blood vehicles. If they're being dug out of the ground by these kids and you show it.
That's a great question. There's a book called Cobalt Red that asks the same question. You know, people stopped buying mink coats because of how the animals were being treated, but they seem to be completely indifferent about the way people are being treated to mine this stuff that goes into the batteries. And then you have the overall issue of just choice. Most people prefer a gas-powered car, yet you have California and a bunch of other states that follow California's lead, mandating that by the year 2035, pick your year, no more sale of gas-powered cars. And on par, a comparably sized EV is more expensive than the same size gas-powered car. So you're telling poor people you're going to pay more for a car that you probably don't want in the first place. And the batteries are heavier, believe it or not. The wear and tear on the roads is greater. And the battery batteries have a shorter shelf life than the batteries that go into a gas-powered car. They've got to be disposed of some sort of way. You put them in the ground, the toxic stuff leaks and threatens the underground water supply. So there are lots of things that people, I think, don't know, haven't thought through when they think about buying an EV or owning an EV.
And that's why I want people to go to salemnow.com, watch Larry's documentary, Electric Vehicles, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Larry, I got to tell you my favorite part of the documentary, though. I don't know how you persuaded the Ford Bronco at the LA car show to let you take it for a drive. Did you have that set up before you went? Because I was thinking, I'm a lawyer, like you're a lawyer. I'm thinking the liability issues involved in that are significant. How'd you persuade him to do that?
I took off my lawyer hat and I just jumped into the thing. I didn't think about it at all. I probably should have thought it through. There's a lot of liability on both sides that I didn't think through. But again, driving the EV was just wonderful. It was fast. You go from 0 to 60 in a nanosecond. The technology is amazing. And it's a moving target. The technology gets better and better and better. And maybe some of the stuff that goes into the battery will be minimized, if not eliminated, through other kinds of discoveries. So, again, it's a relatively interesting, I think, complicated subject, which I tried to tackle with fairness. And I went into it with an open mind. I left thinking, as you pointed out, that generally speaking, they're probably not better for the planet just on the energy side. And then when you look at the humanitarian stuff, to me, it becomes pretty much of a no-brainer that you ought to think this through before you buy one.
So, Larry, last question. How did you get into this? I love the fact, by the way, that 2 out of the 3 people Larry's talking to don't know he ran for governor and got millions of votes. So that was funny. And you were very self-effacing there. I thought that was funny. But how did you get this idea? I mean, I just never thought of you as an EV guy or a car guy.
Well, I love cars. When I was a kid, my favorite car all time was a 1957 T-Bird. That's the one with the little porthole in the back. So I've always been a car guy, and Impactful Pictures approached me with the idea and asked me what I thought. And I said, I have no idea. I don't know anything at all about EVs. All I know about them is that they're marketed as better for the planet than gas-powered cars. I said, is that true? And they said, that's exactly the question we want you to ask. By the way, Hugh, a few years ago, I bought a 1957 T-Bird. I had enough money that I bought one. Leon Kaplan, who's featured in my film, is the one that recommended the car. I had him because he's a car guy to make sure I didn't get ripped off. Great car. And I drove it every Sunday for about a month. And then I drove it every other Sunday. Then I drove it once a month. Then I drove it once every 3 months. Then it wouldn't start because I wasn't driving it often enough. Then I got it jumped, didn't start it again for 3 months, had to get it jumped again. And finally I sold it because I had accomplished my goal. My goal was to get it. I didn't really feel like driving it or putting up with the maintenance to maintain the thing. I just wanted to kind of check it off my bucket list. After I got it, it just sat around, and I had to
stick with your
AAA to
sweet
get it.
Mercedes. That Mercedes is very sweet. And now everyone who ever watches electric vehicles, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is going to be able to spot you on the highways and byways of the Pacific Coast because it's a very distinctive car, but it's a very sweet car. Hey, Larry, thank you. Congratulations. Good luck with your Pope show. I hope you have better guest book than I did for mine today. No Catholics at all. Larry Elder, good to see you. You can all go and watch electric vehicle. And by the way, before you buy one, do go and watch it because it's so fair. It's absolutely persuasive. It's fair. Electric vehicles, the good, the bad, and the ugly is ugly indeed. Talking to Larry makes me think of my friend, our friend, Dennis Prager, because Dennis, Larry, and I have been doing this together for a very long time. Here's a little bit of Dennis Prager from Pragertopia to give you a Dennis fix today.
I am going to offer a proposition that will strike those of you who went to graduate school as so archaic that you will wonder if I was dropped here in a time machine from 1611. In fact, I need to give a trigger warning. That's what I really need to do. Trigger warning.
I have no idea what Dennis is talking about, but I went to grad school, so now I have to go listen to Pragertopia today to find out what he's talking about. You can join Pragertopia. We hope Dennis is back in June. We pray for him every day, and we hope he's back on the air in June. In the meantime, people just love hearing those little bits of Dennis, and if you want a lot more than a little bit, go to Pragertopia, updated every day. Don't forget Prager University as well, and don't forget, you folks in Jacksonville, listening on AM 600, FM 101.1. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show, and you can like and subscribe to the Hugh Hewitt Show over at YouTube and make sure you don't miss any of our great segments that we put up there. We're trying to connect with Bethany Mandel. While we're trying to do that, I'll give you my first thoughts about the new Pope. Now, I'm Catholic, born and raised, cradle Catholic, K through 12, Catholic education, and I don't remember John Paul the 23rd. I remember Pius VI when he died. I wasn't really aware of him then. And of course, I remember John Paul the first dying quickly and John Paul II being this 58-year-old remarkable Polish Pope who helped Reagan and Thatcher bring down the Soviet Union. From there, we go to Benedict, the scholar, that's going to be a doctor of the church, the great theologian. Then we go to Francis, the humble, pastoral, smell like the sheep Pope from South America. And I didn't know what quite to expect because of the 133 voting members of the conclave, 2/3 of them have been appointed by Francis. It's up to the Pope to name cardinals, and I did not like the cardinals being passed over in the United States, and so I was worried about this. And I've done my reading thus far on Leo the 14th, and he's an Augustinian, and I was reminded by one friend, Luther was an Augustinian too. And so but there are many, many good Augustinian men out there, and they're frontline people. They are an order of priests who have been following the rule of St. Augustine for as long as anyone's been following any rule. The rule of Augustine goes back more than 1,000 years, and it's a mendicant order. They don't know anything. He's a very humble man. He is a Cubs fan. It has been confirmed for me that he's a Cubs fan, so if he posted anything on his X account about the Cubs-Indian series of 2016, I might have a negative take on the beginning. But there are no hot takes on popes. All right, you can't have a hot take. Nobody quite knew what to expect from Francis, and maybe it went a little sideways too often. Maybe he's a little incautious in his words. He was actually doctrinally, at the end of the day, nothing changed, but he sure left a wake of confusion about a lot of different things. And he started synods and synodality, and I'm just a Catholic layperson. I'm not even a Knight of Columbus. All right, I'm just a regular mass-attending Catholic, and try and keep the rules of the church, and also be a good Presbyterian attendee as well. I cover both banks of one river. But I like his initial talk, but you can't tell anything until after many years in the papacy have gone by, and not the first year, not the second year, not the third year. It's really about 4 years in, and at least a couple of the occasions where he elevates cardinals to fill vacancies in the College of Cardinals. And that begins to tell you which way the church. And I hope he goes for some more traditional people. I hope he restores the vigorous observation of the Latin Rite Mass if that is the choice of the local bishop. To me, that was Francis being unnecessarily antagonistic towards a whole bunch of Catholics who do nothing but good for the Pope and the Church. But he got a little grumpy as he got older, and I think that's fairly well known. And he clearly didn't like Americans much. And I think maybe, okay, Hugh Hewitt speculation here. I was so wrong on it would never be an American and it would take months. So take it for what it's worth, not much. Maybe they picked an American because Francis was so anti-American. So maybe they picked the American who is least like an American. I don't know Leo the 14th. I've never heard of him until today. If he was on the list, I didn't even notice it because I just passed over, like they've always put on there. Cardinal Dolan and I would laugh and say, no, we're not going to have an American Pope. And so, yeah, I'm stunned. Chicago, Cubs fan, actually will get Americans. You'll understand the complexities of the American. He went to Villanova. Means he doesn't know anything about college basketball, but it's a very normal Catholic upbringing. Chicago, so Catholic. Cubs fan, sorry about that. Ouch, I thought he'd be White Sox, given where he's from on the south side. The fact is, we don't have any idea how he will lead, or if he will lead or follow, or whether or not it'll be a long papacy. But the last Leo the 13th, started his papacy in 1878 and ended it in 1903. So you can set, there he is. We got, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, that film is the first pope believed to be on film, and it's the first ever pope on film, and it's Leo the 13th. I don't know, and I'm waiting for someone to give me okay, get the magnifying glass out and look for clues. Why Leo the 14th? Because you can pick anything. You can pick Joe, Pope Joe, and Joe Bag of Donuts. You can have any name you want. John Paul I made that up. Like there wasn't a John Paul before that. That's why it's John Paul I, and John Paul the Great, St. John Paul the Great is John Paul II. John Paul I died suddenly after a month. And the verdict on that has always been Holy Spirit wanted somebody else and the conclave didn't get it right. And so prayers that they got it right. But boy, what a shock. Because if anyone had an American Pope on their bingo card, I was listening to Bishop Barron last night. I said this last hour, I'll repeat it. And in my X feed from last night, you can see, if you watch one thing on the conclave, watch Bishop Barron talking to the Irish lad from the ETWN about the various candidacies and what they bring and their strengths and their weaknesses. And Bishop Barron is very thoughtful, very scholarly. And he ran with the standard line, which you will, if you watch cable news, you'll hear it all night long. Nobody thought this was possible, a pope who comes out of America. So what are they thinking? Okay, if you've gone a little bit far in one direction, the old saying, fat pope, thin pope, fat pope, thin pope. Okay, they've gone a little bit progressive, and they went way anti-American. So if the progressives want to kind of get back to the middle without alarming the traditionalists, then go get yourself an American pseudo-progressive. But all members of the church have a preference for the poor. And all members are going to say the sorts of things he has said online. And every Catholic priest and Monsignor and bishop, and I've never known a cardinal, has said, which is, you've got to take care of the poor first. And what you do to the least of these, you've done for me. You got to hold up Christ as, in fact, true and divine and the one true way. You've got to be unapologetic about your missionary zeal. You've got to be willing to tell the world this is the right way. And it's a very unusual choice. I'd be less surprised by anybody else other than an American. I would be less surprised. But the Holy Spirit is in charge. So we just got to pray for the church and for Leo the 14th. Even if you're not a Catholic, you don't want him to fail. The church is awfully big, and it is the most visible religious leader in the world. I know some people like to say the Dalai Lama. I have met him. I've spent a few hours with the Dalai Lama. But I don't think that's true. I think he's a nice Buddhist, but they're not 1.4 billion, and they did not create Western civilization quite the way that the Catholic Church did. And so it's a extraordinary thing that two popes in a row come from the New World, one from South America, one from North America, and I guess we are all living in a new age, and I'm hopeful that this new pope is cautious and careful and very smart about who he surrounds himself with, and that the Vatican gets reformed in the way it needs to be reformed, and that bishops are allowed to be bishops and not told what to do. I'm joined by Sarah Bedford, senior writer at the Washington Examiner. Sarah, I'm glad to have you here because there's news from the Hill today that the House Ways and Means Committee is floating a draft of reconciliation that has in it a tax hike. True or false?
That is something that is being discussed on Capitol Hill. It's something that the White House seems open to. That had floated about a month ago or a few weeks ago. And there were some Republicans and even White House officials who tried to bat that down, saying, you know what, no, we're not interested in a tax hike. We're the Republican Party. That's not something that Trump wants. And now that seems to have shifted back. And I think that just reflects the desperation Republicans are feeling at this point to make the numbers work. They've made a lot of promises in their resolution. And now that pencil's hitting paper, it's getting really difficult to actually find those cuts.
Now, Sarah, I talked with Chairman Crapo at the beginning of the show, and he told me there are lots of ideas on how to raise revenue that don't involve taxes. You can auction bandwidth, you can auction land and leases, you can open a Roth conversion window on a flat tax. You can do a lot of things, but raising taxes is not what Republicans do. Now, Donald Trump is not a traditional Republican, and he's not looking for re-election, but if you want to get wiped out in the midterms, raise taxes on somebody. I mean, it's what Dick Darman didn't appear to know, and he doomed George H.W. Bush's re-election in 1990 when he proposed and got H.W. to sign off on a tax hike.
Yeah, I think this would be an incredibly difficult pill to swallow for a lot of Republicans. It would just be on the very highest earners in America, people making more than $2.5 million or even $5 million. But still, it's the principle of the thing. Republicans don't raise taxes, they lower them. And the idea of raising taxes in order to keep more government spending, I don't think that's going to go over well with a lot of Republicans. But, you know, they're coming up against this self-imposed deadline of sometime in the summer, and they're still pretty far apart on some crucial things.
Yeah, I do think Senator Crapo sounded pretty optimistic about the Senate side, and if they get to the conference, the president can close the deal. But my first reactions from the groups, you know, all of the conservative groups, and there are a legion inside the Beltway, they're just angry. And a lot of members are just not going to vote, even if it's on people making $2.5 million, because once you put that bracket in, you can start to lower it and raise it. It's just the camel's nose under the tent.
That's right. I mean, I think the fact that you're even having Republican leadership in the White House be open to this idea does reflect that there are some really key differences between Trump populism and traditional conservatism that sometimes get papered over when the party is, you know, not racking up victories. But there are some key differences there. And, you know, the fact is that Republicans, whether you're talking about vulnerable ones or budget hawks, there's different constituencies in the House conference that are squeamish about cutting certain things, squeamish about cutting Medicaid, cutting food stamps, even some squeamishness about cutting green energy projects and stuff that you would think Republicans would be really keen on gutting out of the federal budget. There's difficulty there, and to make the math work, that's looking still as difficult as it did on day one, seemingly.
No, you know, the green energy stuff, I cannot believe they haven't cut that out already. So we'll see. Maybe this is the proverbial trial balloon. Let me switch to the withdrawal of Ed Martin's nomination to be United States Attorney. He's acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Tom Tillis and others said it's not going to fly. President Trump cut his losses pretty quickly on that. Were you surprised?
No, I think that was sort of the word on the street for a little while, is that nomination was dead. Ed Martin had, you know, a social media history and some stuff in his background that were making Republican senators uncomfortable. I think Senator Tillis came out and said he was opposed, but that was a sentiment that was shared by more Republicans than just Senator Tillis. Now, you know, Donald Trump does need someone strong and aligned with him in that position. It was an office that was politicized during the Biden administration. It was the one that was used to go aggressively after January 6th protesters. So, you know, that is an important nomination that Donald Trump does have to think about.
And I want people to know, I saw online a bunch of misinformation. The judges can name an interim U.S. attorney, but they can't name the permanent U.S. attorney. Anytime Donald Trump nominates someone who can get 51 votes or 50 votes plus the vice president, that person will be confirmed as U.S. attorney in D.C. And it does, as Sarah Bedford just noted. It makes a big difference. Sarah C. Bedford on X, thank you. Good to see you. I hope you are well, and people, your fan club in the background there does very well as well. Let me tell you about
Great, I'm
Relief
glad you could hear
Factor. Be well. Relief Factor is our sponsor of our studio. Oh, I timed that badly. I'll come back and tell you about it at the end of the show. You can go to Relief Factor and get an extra 1-800-4-RELIEF plug in there. 1-800-4-RELIEF. Joined by Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri. He's also the chairman of the Reagan Institute's National Leadership Program. Jim, another slow news day. I don't know what to talk about. Actually, what do you think of an American Pope?
Well, what I thought was that, boy, Hugh Hewitt's had a great week. He interviewed the American president, and now he's got an American Pope. I'm not Catholic myself, Hugh. I have to tell you, I was pleasantly shocked. I mean, I like the idea of an American Pope, but I never thought they'd pick one. But God moves in mysterious ways, Hugh.
Oh, he does. And I'll tell you, a Chicago kid and a Cubs fan who went to Villanova, I know he spent 2/3 of his life in the Vatican in South America, but he's going to be American in his bones. The DNA is there. And I think the advantage is he'll really, no matter where he is on any particular issue, he'll understand the American reaction because he will understand Americans, right?
Yes, and I'm not holding it against him that he's a Cubs fan. I mean, a lot of people in Chicago have that problem. And, if I were Catholic, I think I could forgive him.
Well, the Cubs beat the Indians. The Cubs beat the Indians in the 2016 World Series, and so I don't know that I can forgive him for that. But I was hoping he was a White Sox fan, but it's been revealed he's a Cubs fan. Let me ask you about the second big story of the day. House leadership unveiled details of the House reconciliation bill. Now, you were both in the House and the Senate, so you know,
right.
And you were probably around in 1990 when Dick Darman did the deal that raised taxes that broke George H.W. Bush's pledge to read my lips, no new tax. What are they thinking, Jim Talent? It is a bad, bad idea.
Well, I went into the House in 92, actually, and with Mike Crapo, who's aged very well.
Oh.
Next time you interview him, tell him hi for me. He's very professional, very measured. I don't think it's going to happen. Crapo said, we've got hundreds of proposals on the table. They're at that stage in this discussion where they're still sorting through all that. But when you think of the kind of tax increase they could do, and I think Sarah just talked about it, like a small percentage increase at the very top of the income ladder, that's not going to raise any revenue anyway. I mean, it's the kind of thing they look at and then they say it's not worth all these groups jumping all over us and this bill then being characterized as a tax increase bill. So I'll be surprised if they try to do that. I think they've got a problem because the House is insisting on a SALT tax cap raise and also on spending cuts, and the Senate doesn't want to swallow either one of them. But they'll come to a compromise, and I think you may get your Roth IRA reform because you've been lobbying all the key people on it. And I can tell they're listening. They're thinking, I wonder how much revenue we can get out of that.
It's easy money. I tell you, with $20 trillion in traditional retirement, every year after you're 65, you get pitched on making a Roth conversion, and it never makes any sense because you don't know what the tax hike, what the rate's going to be. It could be up or down. Never makes sense. But if they open a window at 15%, people will flood into that. I mean, they'll reap the tax revenue one time, but it'll get them through this reconciliation, and then they can deal with the spending. The real trauma is with the spending, isn't it, Jim Talent? Because people don't like to cut anything, even when it's Medicaid and it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real trauma, I think, in the Senate. I think the House is pretty reconciled to that. But I think they're going to get it because these, if you want to call them these caucuses in the House, the SALT tax caucus and the spending cut caucus, have done the right thing. They've staked out their claims for a long time. Everybody understands why they're making them, the political and policy reasons behind them. They remember they defeated the reconciliation bill initially in the House and got further promises from the Speaker. So I think the Senate understands they're going to have to give way. Now, what you're going to see in response for that is a lot of individual senators getting things inserted in this bill. And I'm actually a little more worried about that there could be some things in the bill that individual senators want that when we discover what they are, everybody says, oh, there's more log rolling, and there's going to be some of that. But I think at the end of the day, they'll get there. I really do. The president, I think, said so. He said, we're not going to allow any grandstanding. And so if you haven't staked out a claim in advance and what you want is not broadly consistent with the goals of the bill or the other imperatives in the bill, you're not going to get it. I think you're going to have to vote for it anyway.
Now, you said something very interesting that I hadn't considered. Senator Crapo is a very respected, very careful senator. Does that help get this over the close? I mean, an honest broker with a very, very excellent staff.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this because Mike is a friend, and I don't say it about Jason Smith, even though he's a friend too. He was a county coordinator for me about 20 years ago. We really are fortunate that both of the major tax writing committees are led by very competent professional people who have outstanding staffs, as Senator Crapo said today. So they know the difficulties. They've got a lot of tricks up their sleeve still to make the numbers work. I saw that the House is going to try and attach the REINS Act to the House bill and get it scored and get it past the Byrd rule, and they may be able to do it, and that would be extremely significant. I'm wondering if they're going to get that.
Senator, I have no idea what the REINS Act is. What is it?
Okay, the REINS Act is I know I've used an acronym without explaining. The rein in excessive government regulations.
Oh, okay.
It's a bill that's been around a long time that says when the government passes a regulation, a major rule, something that costs too much money, it doesn't take effect unless it's approved by a joint resolution of the Congress. It also allows them to do Congressional Review Act legislation by packaging a number of bills together instead of having to vote on each one separately. It'd be the biggest regulatory relief that we've had in a long time. And they've been working in the House on how to get it past the Byrd rule in the Senate so they can put it on reconciliation. They think they've done it in the House. It's probably worth, I'm not going to tell you who you have on your show.
Yeah, I'm going to have to find an expert. Immediately, an alarm bell goes off. Chadha versus Immigration Naturalization Service, unconstitutional legislative veto. Doesn't that sound like a legislative veto to you?
No, because it's not Congress. It's part of the requirement in passing the regulation in the first place. No, I think it's constitutional. It says the Congress.
I will dig into that. I will dig into that. Jim Talent always brings something useful to the table. He did again today. Follow him on X at Jim Talent on a historic day. Really historic day. We've never had an American Pope before. Countries founded in the 1600s. Catholic Church founded in the single digits, double digits, I guess. And when does Peter get to Rome? I don't know, 45, 80, I'm not sure. But that's where Peter went. That's why it's the throne of St. Peter. Peter went to Rome, so did St. Paul. And so for more than almost 2,000 years, there's been a pope. And of course, none of them have ever been an American before, or even from North America, Canada or Mexico. And so it's astonishing, actually. I keep watching the film of it on the Financial Times website, ft.com. And I've never heard of Robert Prevost before. He's my age. So he's a kid from Chicago who grew up watching Gilligan's Island on days off. And I'm sure he went to Catholic school. And I was hoping he was a White Sox fan, so I wouldn't have to worry about his fan choices, but he's a Cubs fan. That's unfortunate. We'll get deep dives. They'll go find he went to Catholic school. They're all going to have the permanent record. They're going to go find his third grade report card by the end of the day in Chicago. And we're going to find Sister Benedicte. That was actually my third grade teacher. We're going to find out who his third grade teacher is. And if that wonderful sister is still alive, she will give us an opinion. There will be some priests who had him in the parish and he was an altar boy somewhere, and we're going to find out his best friend here and his best friend there. and we're going to hear about what he thinks about this and what he thinks about that, and what he tweeted here and what he tweeted there, and we won't know anything. There's just, you don't know until they do the job, and the job is hard. So just say a prayer for Pope Leo the 14th. That's going to take some getting used to. Overnight analysis will bring you more tomorrow. I want to make sure I tell you about Relief Factor because they do sponsor my studio. They do keep me going on days like today. I was sitting at lunch today downtown, and I was running all day long, and got to lunch and sat down, and we got going. And a friend comes over and introduces himself to my lunch colleagues and says, we got a Chicago Pope. And I thought, Cardinal Kupich? I was just astonished. And it's not Cardinal Kupich, it's Cardinal Prevost. And he wasn't in Chicago. He was at the Vatican. He's been at the Vatican running the bishop's business for a while. But I was still had to get back to the studio and tape and do some stuff. And so Relief Factor comes in great on days like this. And that's why you want to call 1-800-4-RELIEF. You can keep going and going and going. If you don't have minor aches and pains that are slowing you down and making you think about other than what you want to think about in the news business, I cannot tell you how important that is, not to be bothered by minor aches and pains and to keep exercising and feeling good. And you can start it on their special 3-week starter pack for $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Relief Factor is a packet of supplements like carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, tested forever by doctors. I've been using it for 10 years. It's the only supplement I've taken for 20 years. I don't endorse supplements other than Relief Factor because I don't want to take them. I do believe in Relief Factor. Don't stop taking anything your doctor says, but put away the Tylenol and the Advil and try ReliefFactor.com. Go to their website, find that starter pack at ReliefFactor.com.